This is Dr. Chris with Radio Horror on 91.3 FM, WCUW in Worcester, Massachusetts. And this is a recorded interview with Kyle Kukta, the director of Phantasm, a movie about the horror industry, but not in quite the way you think about it, more about the conventions and why do fans go to these conventions. Hence, the name of the movie is Phantasm. Thanks for coming on the show with us, Kyle. Tell us a little bit about what Phantasm's all about.
Phantasm is about horror conventions and the kind of horror community and how devoted we are to the genre that we love so much. And what better way to explore the genre that we love so much than going to a horror convention, the epitome of fandom. So it explores a little bit about why we love horror so much, what makes these events so important to us, and the friendships and relationships that we make with people that we meet there.
Where did this all start?
For me, I mean, I've been a horror fan all my life since I was, 4 years old, and I went to my first convention when I was 15. And I had gone to conventions all through my high school career, but then I went to college and I couldn't go to conventions anymore. I started feeling this kind of empty void that wasn't being filled. I could watch all the horror movies that I wanted, but I didn't really have anybody to share that love with or, just kind of celebrate horror. So I wanted to go to a horror convention again, but instead of being a 15-year-old kid going with his parents, I got to be, a 21-year-old adult going out to these conventions and really interacting with people. So I started realizing how important that is for a horror fan, when you're devoted to a genre you love that much. So not everybody necessarily understands, but when you go to a horror convention, everybody understands, and everybody has their own story and their own background. And I think that that's such a unique thing for the horror genre that I wanted to be able to bridge the gap between people who know that this community exists and who are a part of this community and who love the genre, and people who don't necessarily know so much about horror movies or why people like them.
What was the first horror convention you went to?
The first one was Rock and Shock in 2006. That was my first one. I'm from Connecticut originally, so I'm only about an hour away. I'm from southeastern Connecticut, so it's just an hour basically straight up the state into Worcester. So Rock and Shock was the first one, and my mom took me to it, and it changed me, which is obviously why I made Phantasm.
We've been going to Rock and Shock since 2004, I believe, so 1 year after they started. And we skipped 2005, but ever since 2006, we've been going back every year. In the last couple of years, we've broadcast at it.
Yeah, it's a great show.
What are, without giving a lot away, because we're going to have you back on in a few months when the DVD comes out, what are some of the things we can expect to find on the documentary, and who?
Well, I interviewed a few fans, a few vendors, and a few guests. As far as vendors go, you can see in some of the trailers that we released, we've interviewed the people with Fright Rags. We've interviewed this artist, Zombie Romance, Crystalline Stevenson, who's done Zombie Romance, who's at Rock and Shock a lot. As far as guests, we've interviewed Joe Lynch, Tom Atkins, Heather Langenkamp, and a couple others I won't give away, but there might be some hints and clues in the teaser and the trailer if you check that out.
When you were a kid, what was the first horror movie that you saw that started your obsession?
I saw Creature from the Black Lagoon. My grandparents and I would go to Vermont every year for like a long weekend or a week. I don't exactly remember because I was pretty young, but we would watch over a condo of a friend of theirs, and there was a video store right down the street, and they went and we picked out Creature from the Black Lagoon. And I don't remember why, I don't remember if I picked it or they picked it, but they had a really awesome horror and sci-fi section in that video rental store. And I would just go in there and I would just look at all the covers. And, my grandparents wouldn't buy anything too scary for me, but they knew that I would be able to kind of enjoy some of those older pictures, like The Fly and Creature from the Black Lagoon and, Frankenstein and stuff like that.
Don't you think that mom and pop video stores are a lost treasure like Diecast?
Oh man, you don't. It's so sad. I went to my local video store, and like even if it is on DVD or Blu-ray, I still love the idea of going and looking at all the covers and just being able to rent one. And I went home for spring break, and there was a video rental store. This was a year back now. I'm sorry, winter break. A year back, I went home for winter break, and we still had our, small town video rental store open. And I was so excited. I went and I rented a bunch of movies and, returned them before I left for school. And then I came back for spring break, and it was completely gone. I had no idea, and it was so much sadder than I expected it to be. I was so bummed. I miss stores like that, man.
A lot of times these stores need to get into the adult film industry in order to stay alive. And there's a store in Leominster that still rents movies and up-to-date movies that are coming out on DVD now, such as like Django Unchained. But a large section of their store has turned into an adult novelty porn store, which is fine. I mean, we're all adults and we all need to spice up our lives. However, it's just kind of sad that they need to go that route. So it's kind of a hit or miss. On one hand, I'm all in support of an adult store because I definitely believe it helps relationships further along when you explore your sexuality with your partner. But at the same time, if that's what they're relying on to stay open, it takes away from what they originally were.
Yeah, that's such a strange saving grace to have to reach out into that sort of realm. You would think you would have to sell DVD players or something instead, but you have to go the adult industry route. It's interesting.
What are some of the challenges you've had to overcome in making this, and what are you going to college for?
I'm a film major up at Syracuse University, so this is Phantasm has doubled as my senior thesis to get my Bachelor's of Fine Arts here in film.
So, just to interrupt you, Kyle, as everyone knows, you don't need to go to school to be a filmmaker, according to Quentin Tarantino and Steven Spielberg. So, a fool and his money are soon... Oh, I'm just kidding.
You certainly don't. It's helped me a lot, and that's a bunch of different things. That was, and this actually, Phantasm has helped me a lot too in this realm. Like some of the challenges were, my confidence issues in filming people, filming real life things and happenings, without being, in their business or bothering anybody. That was one of the biggest challenges for me filming at this convention. And just, making sure that I'm, filming what needs to be filmed, Because I can't go back to these conventions, I don't have time or money to go back to the conventions and, film again for that weekend. So making sure that I got everything that I wanted to film was a huge challenge. And just also being courteous to people, at the convention and that are enjoying it and are there to, have a good time and not be bothered by this dude with a camera.
I think Rock and Shock was also my very first convention I went to in 2004 when I was 24 years old. I didn't go to any conventions when I was a teenager because my father didn't quite believe in that sort of thing. But I definitely believe Rock and Shock was probably my first convention to go to. Did you see the parody of Rock? Well, that's not a parody, but they couldn't film at Rock and Shock just because they needed to complete the first season of Holliston, and Rock and Shock was not happening at that time. They needed to complete it, so they came up with a mock-type Rock and Shock event in Worcester, Massachusetts on the television series Holliston in Season 1, Episode 6. Did you see that?
Yeah. No. My roommate and I love Holliston, and the first season we watched it all together. And he's from Marlborough, Massachusetts, and he actually, weird story, he went to the same convention that I went to in 2006, and we were actually in the same room watching them screen Slither with Michael Rooker, and we had no idea we knew each other, and now we're best friends and roommates up here at college, which is really weird. But we were, back to Holliston, we watched Holliston, and when that episode came up, we were so pumped because we had both been to Rock and Shock and we both experienced horror conventions, and it was such a good episode, and it was really funny to see somebody tap into that genre trope of horror has conventions.
Science fiction conventions.
I'm sorry?
Science fiction has conventions.
Yeah, science fiction does have conventions. Science fiction and horror
And fantasy.
conventions, but you don't see conventions for gangster films. Really.
No.
Anything. I don't know. We're a very niche sort of genre, but there's actually still a lot of differences between sci-fi conventions and horror conventions that I've found. Not just only through Phantasm. I sort of knew about them before, but even more so through filming Phantasm.
Yeah, and fantasy conventions as well. I just forgot about that. Fantasy conventions are pretty big. They're bigger overseas than they are here in the States, but man, they are there in video game conventions and anime conventions. But in terms of the movie industry, you're right. It's the big two probably are science fiction and horror.
Yeah, and when people think of any sort of convention that has to do with films, it's even the immediate thought is the sci-fi convention where everybody's dressed up and half the people are there in their Starfleet uniforms. That's where the general public's mind first goes, which is also why I wanted to do this, because I felt that horror fans aren't always represented correctly.
Nope.
And I think that if I could help bridge that gap a little bit, that would be we'd be one step closer to gaining acceptance.
There is when you were talking about really quickly going back to the mom and pop video stores and renting. Somebody had given me for a gift I don't know how many movies are on this. I gotta grab it. Oh, it is 9. It's a 9 DVD. It's a 9 film collection of Children of the Corn. So it's almost every single Children of the Corn, with the exception of the first one, then the 2 remakes. And I just was thinking about looking at this, thinking about it, going, wow, if DVD hadn't come out and compressed video as much, and the technology hadn't come along where they can compress video as much as they have, then I would go to the video store, and if I was that interested in Children of the Corn, rent 2, then go back and rent 3, then rent 4, then rent 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. Just like with the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween movies, you could do that in the 80s, but you can't do that anymore, and that's really sad. What is your favorite...
It's sort of like having your own film festival in a way. Even if it's for the same franchise, it's like you have to, go get the other single film, bring it back, watch it, then go get the next one.
What is your favorite horror movie, by the way, before we let you go?
Tourist Trap. I'm a sucker for Tourist Trap, and that is one that I always show to people because I think it's so much fun. It's creepy. The soundtrack's weird. It's still it's pretty low budget, pretty B-rate, but it's still creepy in its own right. I love that film.
Well, Kyle, we appreciate you taking some time out from your busy schedule, getting this documentary done, and we look forward to it coming on DVD in October in time for Rock and Shock. And we'll have you back on the show. In fact, we might even, since you'll be in town for Rock and Shock that weekend, maybe you can just come to the studio that weekend.
That would be awesome. I'm trying to figure out my travel plans to get back here for that anyway. But because I'll be on the West Coast at that time, but I'm trying to make it back to Rock and Shock because it's almost my home away from home convention-wise.
Yeah, you definitely have to come back for Rock and Shock. It's going to be big.
Absolutely.
Considering
10-year anniversary.
10-year anniversary, yeah. And this, just a few weeks ago, was the 15th anniversary of Metal Fest.
I heard Metal Fest was insane. I wish I could have made it.
Well, again, Kyle, thank you so much for taking some time out to come on the show with us, and stay in touch on Facebook and everything. And do you have a website or a blog for the updates on the movie?
Just right now, it's just the Facebook page. So you can just search Phantasm with an F, or Facebook/PhantasmDoc. We're also on Twitter @PhantasmDoc.
Awesome. Again, Kyle, thank you so much for taking some time out to come on the show with us to talk about this, and we'll air this in probably about a week or 2.
Awesome. Chris, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem, man. We've been keeping up with this ever since we heard about it last year from Heather.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem, man. Stay in touch. Bye.
Yeah, absolutely.